Okay, you're on.
All right. Late night from Willowdale. Sorry for all the videos, but this is a quick one. But this I want you to make you think. Like attacks on the attacks by the United States, France, and Britain the other night were clearly done for domestic audiences. They're meaningless. They're not going to mean anything. They're not going to change the equation in Syria. The world's not going to be a better place. They're clearly done for domestic consumption. The countries involved have all their own domestic problems, and attacking Syria is harmless. And if they kill a few Arabs, they don't care. It looks like last night's attacks didn't kill a lot of people, which is a good thing. And it looks like they didn't want to escalate any problems with Russia, which is a good thing. But they were pathetic in a way because, Britain and, the French really encouraged this, which is kind of scary. And we talked about this in the video we did a few nights ago. Yeah, there we go. Of course, Trump launches attack on Syria in the failing New York Times. What I find fascinating about this all is the former colonial powers of the Middle East, France and Britain, they were so enthusiastic about this attack. And it's kind of sickening. These are countries that claim, whose imperial past is long gone, but they still want to have some sort of claim to a glorious imperial future by latching themselves onto the United States. Basically, France and Britain were the former colonial powers of the Levant and most of the Middle East, but they left, after the First World War, it all crumbled and they were gone. But they still claim they still want to have this claim to that region. And as you know, in Lebanon and
they're too white. They're too white.
Yeah. In Lebanon, a lot of people still speak French, and Britain still has this colonial history in Palestine and Egypt. Well, the place is endless. Things are endless, and so latching onto the United States in this attack is just sort of they're claiming their and this has happened before. They're just claiming the pathetic sort of clinging to the pathetic sort of past of an imperial when they were imperial powers, and Britain is certainly not an imperial power anymore, and France is long gone. Oh God, when Theresa May spoke at the Davos summit recently, nobody attended. Britain is a has-been power, and even though London's still a major financial center, with Brexit and all that going on, Britain is sort of fading into this. Talk about fading into the sunset of empire. But yeah, and Macron wants to be a major power in the world, a major power in Europe, confronting Putin and all that. It's all laughable. I mean, France is laughable. Its economy is laughable. The French military is laughable. I mean, but they're striding the stage with this clown Donald Trump. Don't get me wrong, the Americans still have the most powerful military in the history of the world. I mean, they have 11 carrier groups. Nobody can compete with that. But I thought the whole thing was laughable, and I'm rambling here, and I'm not as articulate as I should be. But I think you know what I'm saying. The former imperial powers, the colonial powers, latch on to the current imperial power, the United States, to launch attacks in Syria. And of course, they're meaningless. They're not going anywhere.
Kind of makes Macron look a little weak too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For all his big talk,
he looks
right?
like an American toady. And the Brits have always been American toadies. And these chemical weapons facilities they hit, I'm sure they may or may not have been legitimate. I don't know. But it's all meaningless because, first of all, there have been lots of chemical attacks in Syria, mostly conducted by the Assad regime, and nobody cared. Nobody launched strikes or whatever. This is fit, right? At this moment in time, it fit. The Britons are annoyed because Putin tried to poison a guy in Britain. The French need to strut on the world stage, and Trump has domestic problems that we all know about. So it all just came together. But yeah, there have been like well over 30 chemical weapons attacks in Syria, and nobody did anything. So Syria is a god-awful mess, okay? I'm going to quote the New York Times. Let me open this up. Sorry, I have to open this up. But everyone should know this statistic. The Syrian Center for Policy Research, which used to be based in Damascus, but they left for all the reasons. They're very credible. The Syrian Center for Policy Research, which says that 470,000 people have perished in Syria, have died in Syria since this conflict began in 2011, 7 years ago. 470,000 people. Most people see those estimates as very credible. You know what? You know what 470,000 people is? That's basically the population of Hamilton, Ontario, or the population of Sacramento, California. It's a lot of people. It's well over 2% of the Syrian population, which is about a little over 22 million people. Imagine that. Well over 2.2% of the Syrian population has died in the last 7 years. That's incredible carnage. That's a stain on the human. It's a blood stain on the human conscience that we've allowed this to go on. What kind of a world are we living in? Where this once vibrant country has lost well over 2% of its population. You know, it's lost. Like, you look what's going on, see at Aleppo. It's so horrible, and we've allowed it to go on. And you know, symbolic airstrikes, they ain't gonna do it. You need a concerted political effort to put an end to this. You got to include the Russians. You got to include the Iranians. Bring all the European allies in there. This is just I mean, think about that. 470,000 people have died in 7 years in a country of only 22 million people. Like I said, if I speak to Americans, that's the size of Sacramento, California. If I speak to Canadians, it's the size of Hamilton, Ontario. It's incredible. It's a stunning loss of human life, and nobody cares. And meaningless airstrikes, they're not going to do it. And yes, the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons. They've done it many times. And that's the other part of this. We don't strike them every time they do it. And I don't think we need, there's so many culprits here, okay? And yeah, the Russians are a big culprit. I know a lot of people on the left give the Russians a pass. Are you kidding? They're a major culprit. Iran is meddlesome, but the Americans, we're all in there. All the Western powers are in there. And the Turks are in there, and it's a mess. And it needs to be resolved, and I don't see any effort to resolve it. Trump's feeling good today because, it takes away from his domestic problems, which we know are many. Hey, maybe we should send Stormy Daniels in there. I think Stormy could deal the deal. She's pretty intelligent,
Apparently.
And, maybe we should Stormy to North Korea, too. Stormy, I think, could do a lot of things. Anyway, I'm joking, but the world, this is a mess. And I'm going to end this video on the hypocrisy. Okay, there's obviously a conflict in Central Africa and Congo that's horrible, and it's cost thousands of lives. We don't care. The one that strikes out is Yemen, because Yemen is being conducted by Saudi Arabia. And that's an American ally, a Canadian ally, a Western ally. And Yemen is, how many? 14,000 lives, right?
Yeah, 13,900, I think. But yeah, that's almost Wikipedia.
14,000 lives have been lost in Yemen based on the... I know Iran is involved there as well. But it's basically on the savagery of the Saudis. The Saudis conducted this vicious war in Yemen, killing thousands of people, as 13,000 to 14,000 people are dead. And we don't care. And we don't... why aren't we striking? Why aren't we bombing Riyadh? Why aren't we striking against the Saudis? Of course, the Saudis are an ally, and we totally give them a pass. And that's the hypocrisy of international affairs. You know, Clayton and I looked up that quote. Chomsky always likes to use it, but it's a famous quote, whose ox is being gored? You know, and it's about the hypocrisy in international affairs. So, the world's a mess. And Francis Fukuyama said, you know, back in 89, 90, whenever the hell it was, that with the end of the Cold War, the world's going to be a better place. You know, the end of history? Well, the end of history hasn't happened. And the world's a bigger mess than it ever was. And carnage is going on in places that it's just so unseemly. Like, okay, we always use the Holocaust as a number, right? 6 million dead. 500,000, almost 500,000 people in Syria are dead in 7 years. Well over 2% of their population. There's a Holocaust going on in Yemen, and we don't care. And airstrikes in Syria are not going to end that carnage. And the world doesn't seem to care. And, you know, it's stunning. But I don't know how to end this video, but it's going to end in selective military strikes by the former colonial powers and the United States are not going to make this situation better. The only thing, if Trump really wanted to make it better, because he's always the art of the deal, he would get together the Russians and the Iranians and the Turks and all the players and get them together and strike a deal. It won't be perfect, but Syria will never be the same country. Humpty Dumpty, you know, fell off a wall, and Humpty Dumpty ain't coming back. What's that? I don't even know what that is.
I forget how to say it. It's Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Exactly. And Humpty Dumpty ain't coming back together again.
He was an egg, right? He was an egg or something.
Yeah, so. Anyways, there are solutions to these things. They're not perfect, but it takes will. And Canada could play a role. We have our own domestic crisis here too, pipelines and all that. Canada could play a role, but yeah, I found the role of Britain and France in this is just so pathetic, and I have to say I'll give Trump a pass on this. I blame Macron for some of this. This guy, the French president, who wants to take a major role in the world, and he really wants to the French Republic and all that. Kind of pathetic. Like, Jesus. I don't know. You know, I'm kind of happy that China is taking a lead role in world affairs. Despicable is a lot of what China does, but yeah. And I don't give Putin a pass at all. Like, he's involved. He's up to his bloody shirt in this. So, what I'm trying to say, and I'm going to end this, and it went on longer than I wanted it to, but if you want to end the Syrian conflict, you've got to bring all the parties together. You've got to really make a concerted effort to get it done. You got to accept the America's got to realize the Iranians are involved. You got to accept Russia's role. They got to accept that this murderer Assad will be in power because he has a lot of support, and you've got to accept certain things. Yeah. But on Yemen, yeah, the world should not give Saudi Arabia a pass. Okay, Saudi Arabia is a pretty vicious place. Imagine MBS Mohammed bin Salman just toured the U.S. Got great reviews, had dinner parties with all the Hollywood celebrities. Imagine if Bashar al-Assad toured the U.S. Like, he wouldn't even be allowed into the U.S. But they're both thugs and murderers. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I said, it's whose ox is being gored. It's hard to take any of this stuff seriously. That's why these strikes on Syria make me sick, because it's hard to take it seriously. Ain't gonna go anywhere. And the carnage in Syria that's already claimed almost 500,000 lives, the population of Hamilton, will continue. And that's it, Clede. That is it.